Lord Monckton is our guest. He is going to Copenhagen. I just talked to him. He's going to be gracious enough to give us a report from Copenhagen. This is just amazing. This is a short segment, long segment coming up to get into plenty of information, but I don't want to just skip over the fact that global warming, man-made global warming is meant to destroy industrial society, as Maurice Strong has said. Sir, can you go over just briefly some of the evidence of what this will do? From their own words, they want to shut down the industrial society and have a global government, in their own words, as Van Rompuy had just said last week, the new EU chief, to bring in global governance where this group of bureaucrats become the new kings and queens over a giant tyranny.
That's exactly what the aim has been. Sir Maurice Strong, who was a Canadian bureaucrat at the UN 25 years ago, it was he who decided that setting up the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change as a political body rather than a scientific one would be the Trojan horse by which the UN could achieve its long-held ambition of turning itself into a dictatorial world government. And a few weeks ago, thanks to a very diligent scientist called Willie Soon at the Harvard-Smithsonian Institute for Astrophysics, I was able to get hold of an advanced copy of the draft Treaty of Copenhagen, which I'm going to go to Copenhagen to try to negotiate away next week. But there'll be 200 countries there, 250 UN bureaucracies, different bureaucracies will be there, let alone how many bureaucrats in each bureaucracy. A huge jamboree. And in the draft treaty, it said they were going to set up a world government. The word government actually appears in the treaty in this context for the first time that I've ever seen it, and I've negotiated quite a few of these treaties in the past. And it's going to give this government the power to control all formerly free markets, a point which Van Rompuy, the new dictator of Europe, has also just said. He doesn't want free markets anymore, he wants it regulated. And that's what they're going to do to markets all around the world, all in the name of saving the planet from a problem we know is no longer a real problem.
Well, that's what Ban Ki-moon said in the New York Times 3 weeks ago. He said the UN will control world resources and a global government.
That's exactly their ambition. They want nothing less than total world domination, to use the old phrase, and rather than doing it by going to war, as they would have had to in the old days, like Alexander of Macedon or Adolf Hitler or Napoleon, all these people with more ambitions than taste, they want to do it by a bureaucratic, stealthy coup d'etat. What they did was they hid this draft treaty as an annex to a two-page note by the Secretariat of the Conference of the States Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, buried on a UN website. That's where Willie Soon, who reads everything, thank heaven, found it. He saw it, sent it straight to me, and I discovered in the annex to this note 186 pages of a draft treaty, which they had kept secret by putting it openly on a website but burying it as an annex without saying it was there. So that when they had eventually pushed this treaty through, they were going to turn round with looks of surprise on their faces and say, what do you mean we hadn't published it? It's been on our website for weeks. That's the sort of game these shabby people play to try to trick us into giving up our freedom, our democracy, and our prosperity. And, of course, the U.S. Constitution would be made subject to this new treaty. If this treaty is signed by Obama, even if the Senate doesn't ratify it, and I don't think the Senate now will, because I've been into the Senate and talked to several senators, and I said, you sign this, it's over the dead body of the American Constitution. Don't do it. And I don't think they will. I've spoken to several of them now. The trouble is, though, that Obama might just say, well, I have signed this treaty using my executive authority as president, and I am either going to enact it into domestic law by a simple majority of both houses as an ordinary domestic law, or I'm going to go to the Supreme Court and say, look, the trend of law is towards global governance and dictatorship now. Democracy has had its day, and the Supreme Court, as at present constituted, which hates democracy with a passionate and abiding loathing, will go along with him, I fear, and grant him his wish. So the important thing is that when he goes to Copenhagen, we have to do everything in our power to try to stop him signing the American Constitution and your freedom and your democracy away. Because if your freedom goes down the pan, then so does the freedom of the rest of the world.
Well said. And many members of the Supreme Court have said they want global government, and USA Today that we should follow the orders of the UN. So we are in grave danger. We now see the European treaty being implemented by stealth, not letting the British people have a vote. And Obama saying he's going to use the federal bureaucracy to implement by piecemeal many parts of these global treaties. Schwarzenegger is banning and taxing television sets over their carbon footprint. So it appears that they're trying to force this, even if they can't do it legislatively. Lord Christopher Monckton is our guest. He is the 3rd Viscount Monckton of Brenchley. We're going to come right back and get into the master plan. Scienceandpublicpolicy.org. Scienceandpublicpolicy.org. One word is the website, Lord Christopher Monckton's website. He's with us for another 26 minutes. He's going to be reporting here for us, coming on when he's in Copenhagen. We're lining that up. So very important that he be there with his measured, focused, like a laser beam intellect, exposing these people. He's been fighting them for decades. And, of course, laying out that their science was fraud, because scientists would get the raw data and it didn't match what this pet university used by the UN to put out this fraud was saying. But, sir, I mean, you're someone who I know doesn't, want the credit, but you deserve the credit, literally setting bushfires in the minds of men, as Thomas Jefferson said, here in the United States and Canada with your tour. Perfect fate or providence building up to these wonderful leakers, probably not hackers, leakers, inside this head climatology bureau at East Anglia. I mean, just amazing. Can you speak to that? And then, number 2, to the mindset of Maurice Strong. I talked to you during a break. You said you had read Eco-Science and their calls for world population reduction, drugging the water, just a planetary regime to carry out the police state and then the world population reduction. Lord Monckton.
Let's go back to the book that John-Holdren, who is the current so-called science czar, of course we would call him a commissar. That's what he is. He's a communist, this guy, and an openly admitted communist. And he's the science advisor to the President of the United States. Can you believe it? He, with Paul Ehrlich, wrote a book 30 years ago in which he said that because of humankind's influence on the climate, there was going to be rapid global cooling in the next 10 years, he said. And this was going to cause so much ice to pile up on Antarctica that it would fall off and fall into the water and cause a tidal wave bigger than any ever seen in human history. And I'm actually quoting from the book when I say that. That was his view 30 years ago. Now, with seamless mendacity, he now says that what we're facing is global warming, also from human influence on the climate. And actually, there is no more basis whatsoever for saying that there's going to be global warming than there is global cooling. I checked that with Professor Dick Lindzen of MIT, who knows more about the atmosphere than anyone and doesn't believe a word of either the global cooling or the global warming story. And he says, if you want to take a bet, he said it's 50-50 whether it will be warmer than today or cooler than today in 50 years' time. He said there's no way you can tell. And all these people telling us that if we don't clean up our act, it's somehow going to become warmer when they were previously telling us it was going to become cooler. How can anyone like Holdren stand up with a straight face and expect anyone to believe him? But they do, because they know that the mainstream media are now so left-wing, so captured by the desire to set up this communistic world government, to do away with democracy forever by stealth, using the excuse of saving the planet, that they will drift along with it. If you take people like Sir Maurice Strong, what's in it for him? He's made a lot of money out of this over the years. In fact, he was done under the UN World Oil for Food program at one stage for having put his fingers in the till. These are the people now who are lording it over us. And in the British understanding of the term aristocracy, it comes from the Greek word rule by the best, hoi aristoi, the best. Now we have what I call a kakistocracy of blackguards. It's ruled by the worst, people who have absolutely no moral principle. They don't care how many people they kill with their policies. They don't care that countries in the third world are going to be poor and are going to be starved. There is a direct correlation between the amount of CO2 that you burn in a nation per head of population and the longevity and prosperity of the population. The more CO2 you burn, the longer you live. The less CO2 you burn, the more your children die young.